I need you to listen closely, because this story doesn't start with love. It starts with a lie that felt like hope. It starts on a rainy Tuesday night in Ohio, the kind of rain that soaks through denim and settles into your bones, when I stood outside a county courthouse holding a cardboard sign with a name I barely knew, waiting for a man who told me prison had changed him. And the part that still keeps me awake is this: every word he spoke that night sounded like truth. I didn't know then that love can feel identical to betrayal while it's being born. My name is Claire Morgan, and this is the story of how two hearts tried to beat together, while one lie pulsed between them like a silent third heart. I met Ethan Cole the way so many modern American love stories begin, through a late-night message sent when loneliness gets louder than reason. I was 29, working as a trauma intake coordinator at a Cleveland hospital, pulling double shifts and coming home to an apartment that echoed too much when I dropped my keys on the counter. Ethan messaged me after midnight, simple, direct, honest in a way that felt disarming. He said he was rebuilding his life. He said he had made mistakes. He said he was trying to become someone better. Those sentences didn't scare me. They pulled me in. We talked for hours that first night, about music that made us feel understood, about the smell of diner coffee at 2 a.m., about how some people don't get a fair start and still try anyway. When he finally told me he'd just been released from prison, there was no dramatic pause, no manipulation, just truth, delivered calmly. I remember staring at my phone, feeling my chest tighten, then soften. He said it wasn't violent. He said he took responsibility. He said prison stripped him down to who he really was. And I believed him, because the voice I heard through those words sounded like someone who had already paid. We met for the first time at a roadside diner off Route 90. Red vinyl booths, buzzing fluorescent lights, waitresses who called everyone Han. Ethan stood when I walked in, nervous smile, hands shoved into the pockets of a worn denim jacket. He looked exactly like someone starting over. Our conversations became a rhythm. Morning texts, late-night calls, long walks through Lakewood Park when the wind came off Lake Erie, sharp and honest. He talked about prison like someone recounting a storm they survived, never glorifying it, never asking for pity. I listened the way I listen to patients, with full presence, with belief that being heard can heal something broken. And slowly, without realizing it, I stopped standing on the shore and stepped into his water. Ethan didn't have much. A room he rented above a closed-down hardware store, a construction job paid in cash, a beat-up Ford that smelled like sawdust and cigarettes he was trying to quit. I helped because it felt natural. Gas money, groceries, a resume rewritten on my laptop at midnight. When he couldn't sleep, I stayed on the phone until his breathing slowed. When he had court-mandated counseling, I waited outside like someone who already belonged there. He told me I saved him. I told him he saved himself. Love grew quietly, responsibly, like something fragile we both wanted to protect. He never raised his voice, never disappeared without explanation, never gave me reason to doubt him. And then there was the night everything deepened. Snow was falling, thick and soft, turning the city into something gentler than usual. We sat in my car, heater blasting, fingers intertwined between the seats. He looked at me like he was standing on the edge of something sacred. He said he was ashamed of his past. He said some mistakes don't leave bruises, but still destroy people. I squeezed his hand and told him we all carry ghosts. That was the moment I loved him fully. Not despite his past, but because he was brave enough to carry it without running. Months passed. Seasons shifted. Life felt steadier than it had in years. Ethan talked about the future carefully, like someone afraid to break it by naming it too loudly. An apartment together, a certification program, maybe one day, a house not too far from my parents. I introduced him to my sister at a backyard cookout. He helped my dad fix a leaky gutter without being asked. He memorized how I took my coffee. Nothing about him felt false, until the cracks arrived quietly. It started with paperwork. I needed a copy of his release documents for a housing application that offered reduced rent for re-entry programs. Ethan went still in a way I hadn't seen before. He said he'd misplaced them. He said the process was complicated. He said he'd handle it. I let it go. Then came the names he avoided, the places he never wanted to drive past, the way his jaw tightened when old college commercials played during football games. College. That word hovered where prison stories usually lived. One afternoon, I ran into a woman at the hospital cafe who recognized Ethan's last name. She said it casually, smiling, asking if I was related to that coal boy from Dayton. Her tone wasn't curious, it was wounded. I laughed it off, said maybe, said I wasn't sure. But that night, unease sat between us on the couch like something that refused to leave. I watched Ethan sleep, his face peaceful, unguarded. And I felt something I hadn't felt since my mother died, the quiet fear that truth doesn't always arrive gently. I didn't confront him. I didn't dig. I loved him. And love has a way of trusting silence more than instincts. The lie revealed itself on an ordinary afternoon, the most dangerous kind of day. I was cleaning out a storage unit I helped him rent, sorting through old boxes, dust coating my hands. That's when I found the yearbooks. A university crest stamped in gold, a graduation program, photos of Ethan in a cap and gown, smiling with people who looked like a past he never mentioned. No prison, no gap, no lost years. Just a different life. My chest went cold. I sat on the concrete floor surrounded by evidence that didn't accuse. It contradicted. When Ethan arrived, his face drained of color the moment he saw what I was holding. The silence stretched, heavy and unforgiving. He didn't deny it. He didn't explain right away. And in that pause, something precious cracked beyond repair. He finally said the words that ended the version of love I believed in. He said he was never in prison. He said he ran. He said he hid. He said the lie was easier than the truth he couldn't survive telling. The truth, he confessed, was that he once betrayed the person who loved him most, and when the consequences came, he chose disappearance over accountability. Prison was a story that earned sympathy. His real past earned disgust. I stood there shaking, realizing every act of kindness I offered had been built on a foundation that didn't exist. Love didn't disappear in that moment. It fractured. Because the man I loved was still standing in front of me, but the honesty I fell for had never been real. That was the moment where everything changed, and the moment this story truly began. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't walk out. I just stood there, holding those yearbooks, feeling like the ground beneath me had quietly stepped aside. Ethan kept talking, words tumbling out like he'd been waiting years for the door to finally break open. He said the betrayal happened in college, a long-term relationship, a woman who believed in him before he believed in himself. He said he cheated, lied, used her trust like a safety net, while he chased validation from people who never planned to stay. When she found out, she didn't yell, she didn't beg, she left. And that silence, he said, destroyed him more than any punishment ever could. He spiraled, dropped out, burned bridges, let shame make decisions for him. When life demanded accountability, he ran. Prison, he said, sounded cleaner than cowardice. I listened, but something inside me had already stepped back, arms crossed, guarding what was left of my heart. Because here's the part no one prepares you for. A lie doesn't just change the past. It rewrites every memory that came after it. Every late-night call, every tear he cried in my arms, every dollar I handed over with faith instead of suspicion. They all shifted color. Ethan reached for my hand. I pulled away. That movement hurt him more than any word could have. I told him I needed space. My voice sounded calm. My insides were collapsing. I drove home in silence, radio off, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. That night, I slept on the couch with the lights on. Love doesn't vanish overnight, but trust can. The days that followed felt unreal, like moving through fog while everyone else lived in focus. Ethan texted apologies that were long, careful, desperate. He promised transparency. He promised therapy. He promised he would never lie again. And the cruelest part was this: I believed he meant it. But meaning something and deserving forgiveness are not the same thing. I started noticing things I'd once ignored. How easily he shaped stories, how good he was at reading what people wanted to hear, how pain, when worn convincingly, can look like honesty. That realization didn't make him a monster. It made him human. And that made the decision harder. We met one last time at the same diner where we first fell into rhythm. Same booth, same cracked menu, different people sitting across from each other. Ethan looked smaller somehow, not weaker, exposed. He told me he loved me without trying to soften it. He told me losing me would be the price he finally had to pay. I told him love doesn't survive on feelings alone. It survives on truth. I told him I didn't regret loving him. I regretted that he didn't trust me with who he really was. There was no dramatic goodbye. Just 2 cups of cold coffee and the sound of snow sliding off the roof outside. When I walked out, I didn't look back. Healing wasn't immediate. It was messy, uneven. Some nights I missed him so much my chest ached. Other nights I felt relief like fresh air. I went back to therapy, started running again, learned to sit with silence without filling it with excuses. Months later, I heard Ethan moved back to Dayton, started over again, this time without stories that weren't his. I hope that's true. As for me, I learned something that changed how I love forever. Love doesn't require perfection, but it demands courage. Not the courage to survive consequences, the courage to tell the truth before someone else has to pay for it. 2 hearts can beat in time for a while, but when a lie stands between them, one will eventually stop listening. And this time, it wasn't mine.